Hello, I am delighted to introduce today's spring showcase for water efficiency in faith and diverse communities. So knowledge sharing is so important, and with the challenges we face, such as climate change, ageing, infrastructure and so on, innovation is becoming more and more important to meeting our targets and ambitions. Sharing knowledge of what worked and, importantly, what didn't plays a fundamental role in supporting others, in adapting new ways of working and realising benefits of innovation at scale. We welcome Spring's support to facilitate the session today and the way that they continue to work towards developing best practice, knowledge sharing and culture right across the sector. We've seen knowledge sharing can uncover new opportunities, promote collaboration and avoid reinventing the wheel in different organisations, giving greater value and clarity across the water sector and beyond. And today's showcase touches on a topic which can be explored further and needs the whole sector to embrace and adopt to see the full benefits at scale. It's been an exciting project, which is very different to the typical innovation project that might be more about a shiny new piece of technology or a widget. This one is about engaging with our customers and our communities in a meaningful way, particularly customers who come from diverse communities that can be marginalised in society. The heart of this project was about equity, diversity and inclusion. And it's all about considering how inclusive our services are and those of all water companies today. I'm very pleased to see the insights and the learning that the team have unpacked through in-depth research into our communities, and it's enabled them to test new ways to engage with customers based on faith and cultural aspects of water use, which has provided some incredible learning. I hope you enjoy the showcase and that you'll find some practical takeaways to embed in your own organisations. So a huge thank you from me for joining us. With that, I'll hand over to Moomin and the team. Thank you.
And what we were trying to achieve in terms of the project outcomes. So I'll start off with the first slide. In terms of the why. So the challenge, I think, is very clear that we need to do more in this area. Some of you will be aware we have a huge deficit in the future in terms of the water available and the demand that's expected. The Environment Agency have pulled together all the water resources management plans that water companies have and have predicted a 5 billion deficit of water by 2050. Now, the proposals and solutions to address that deficit, 2/3 of that is going to come from managing the demand for water. So reducing leakage and reducing water consumption. Now, when we reduce water consumption, we need to be effectively and meaningfully engaging customers and communities because it is changing people's behaviors and having that long lasting change. And the reality is we need a generational shift when it comes to how we view and value water. So currently in the UK, we use between 140 to 150 litres per person per day. And the target for the sector is to go to 110 litres per person per day by 2050. So there's so much to do as a sector in terms of reducing consumption. Now, part of that is what we call faith or diverse communities. And we need to recognise the UK has one of the most ethnically diverse towns and cities in the world. And the way we engage these communities, sometimes we need to be mindful what's the right way, what's the do's, what's the don'ts, but more importantly, how do we get that behavior change that we desire in terms of positive change around behavior use and water use and so forth. And linked to that, we need to recognize some of the cultural sensitivity as well. So you see some of these communities, I've got some pictures you see on the slide, for example, fitting a meter. Maybe in some communities, you don't want to be fitting that meter on a Friday or a Saturday. It doesn't work for them. Or when we engage with certain members of the community, maybe there's some communities that feel uncomfortable speaking to the opposite gender alone. So all these little sensitivities that we need to be aware of when we engage with communities and to make sure it's meaningful at the same time as well. The other point to mention as well, lack of trust. We saw from the somewhat recent CC Water, Consumer Council for Water report, where trust was a 13-time low. But in these communities, trust is even more lacking. And that's linked to a number of factors and reasons. You know, if you look at these communities, there's not just a lack of trust, but there is some fear as well. You know, hate crime is at an all-time high, and we don't have to go far. Just last summer riots, you know, there was lots of upset, fear in these communities. So therefore, when corporate companies like us or other companies go and approach, they are going to be questioning, you know, your motive and why you're approaching us. So we need to be mindful of that trust issue, which I know Anastasia will speak about a bit later. Um, and lastly, in terms of water use, how aware or familiar are we of the different types of water use in these communities? So if you look at some pictures here, you can see from rice washing to washing fish, chicken, meats. People are adamant we need to use those, you know, a good amount of water to wash those food items. And then you've got things like, you know, before going in the restroom and before prayers and so forth. So all these areas we explored as part of this project. So clearly the why is definitely needed in terms of doing more in this area. Hey, just making sure it's going to the next slide. How's it going? Oh. Yep, thank you. So an overview of the project. This project was circa 18 months long, and it was focused predominantly in Cambridge and the West Midlands. And the themes for this project was, of course, water efficiency, but behavior change, customer engagement, and at the heart of it was diversity and inclusion. I think as water companies, as practitioners, we need to be mindful of our services. Are they inclusive to customers? Do we need to do more? And if you look at some of our objectives for this project, the first one was all about understanding. So understanding how people use and value water in different faiths and cultures. And then in turn was then taking that knowledge and seeing, can we test different ways of developing behavior change campaigns or new devices to save water? Then at the end of this project, we have developed a framework, a toolkit to help water efficiency practitioners, water companies to embed and implement at a much wider scale. And lastly, in terms of a key objective from this project, was establishing new channels and relationships with key stakeholders. And that has been vital to really achieve some of these objectives. And I think it's so important when you build these relationships in terms of building that trust, and in terms of actually delivering the message through the messenger, which we'll talk about a bit later too. You can see we were proud to have such a good, diverse range of partners and organizations as part of this project. And you can see there's 3 distinct phases as part of this project as well. So that first phase is all about understanding and having that research in terms of what works, how do people use water, and where is the largest water saving opportunity? Where can we actually test and trial some of these interventions? And the second phase was around designing and implementing the interventions, so behavior change campaigns, which Jane will talk about a bit later. And lastly, putting this all together into a toolkit, evaluating what worked, what didn't work, how can we take this forward and scale up, which Rachel will talk about after the break as well. So lots to cover, and I'm going to pass it on to our next speaker, Anastasia.
Hi, I'm Anastasia. I'm a research associate at the Cambridge Interfaith Program, and I sort of led the initial research phase for this project. So I want to start by providing a little bit of framing for this work. So first I'll say that as of 2012, the Pew Research Center estimated that about 8 in every 10 people around the world have some religious affiliation. And today they project that this will rise to about 87% of all people by 2060. So that's a pretty significant number. And these groups often hold moral, financial, political power. And so religious communities can really be critical actors in fostering or stifling the kind of large-scale sociocultural shifts around water that, we're hoping for and aiming for. At the same time, the water crisis is a polycrisis, meaning that it intersects with other kinds of crises, economic, social, and in this case, we might also think about epistemic or ontological crises. So it's really important that we do think about religion and religious lives and desires in our planning and decision making around water. So, okay, with that as our frame, I'll say a little bit about the research we did at the Cambridge Interfaith Program. So Cambridge Water invited us into this project to do some action research on the topic of religion and water use. And the question for them, I think, was, can water efficiency at a customer level be improved by attending to religious water use? And we sort of thought even broader. We wanted to understand how different religious communities use and value water. We only had about 4 months for this work, so we narrowed our focus down to local Jewish and Muslim communities in the Cambridge area. So the research was ethnographic, which means it involves spending time and talking with people, really taking people seriously, taking their perspectives seriously, taking them as legitimate knowledge producers that we as the researchers are there to learn from. So I spent about 4 months kind of reaching out to people, doing participant observation, attending different kinds of events and so on, doing interviews and running workshops. I also met regularly with the Cambridge Water team and members of other water companies and kind of related stakeholders. And for me, they were also interlocutors to this research in that they're also water users. They're also participants in this conversation around water, value, sustainability, and religious life. So what did we learn? Quite a lot. For the sake of time, I just want to highlight a couple of key takeaways, but please feel free to check out the full report online, and I think we'll put a link in the chat at some point to the report. So in general, everyone that I spoke to was aware of the crucial role of water in ritual practice and ethical practice. People were aware of religious mandates related to water, and they critically reflected on how their actions aligned with those obligations. They were aware of the ways water appears in religious texts. Some felt that certain religious orientations better supported sustainability than others. Many people spoke about multiple waters and the different things that different waters can do. Some water can only clean in the hygienic sense, kind of getting rid of germs, but other water, under certain conditions, can purify one's body or one's soul. Some felt that having certain kinds of water in Cambridge made Cambridge a holier place itself. Some people pointed to the environment as inspiring for humans, a reminder of divine presence, and so on. At an institutional level, community leaders and organizers across the board were trying in lots of ways to incorporate sustainable practices and materials into their community actions and spaces, but were sometimes limited by lack of resources or cost, or other kind of urgent choices that needed to be made. Really interestingly, a lot of people offered a variety of interpretations and relations that went beyond water as a commodity or resource whose sole purpose is human exploitation. So some people spoke about water rights, grieving for polluted or vanishing waters, and even water as an actor in itself. When it came to this research and the water companies who instigated it, almost everyone I spoke to was initially skeptical. And I think we could say distrustful or at least uncertain about the companies and their motives. They felt the water company had made lots of mistakes, leaky pipes, dumping sewage, and wondered why the water company was, sort of zooming in on them, maybe targeting them. Possibly there was a feeling of potentially being targeted, potentially being asked to change religious practice. So those are some of the highlights about what we learned from members of religious communities we spoke to. But what did we learn about the water industry? In conversations amongst industry actors, especially at the start of the project, religious community members were framed as kind of distant and mythical others, in possession of religion or culture in ways that we in the water boardroom were not. It was clear that in their personal lives, at least a few of those board members actually were themselves religious in some way, but somehow there wasn't space to acknowledge or be guided by those values in the boardroom. Instead, there was a lot of talk about how they, the customers, are not aware, they need to be educated, we need new messaging, but they're hard to reach. We heard this phrase quite a bit, even as people sort of actively tried not to use it, it kept coming up nonetheless. Ways of talking about water and religious water users in decision-making spaces overlooked or even precluded other ways of relating to and valuing water, and failed to notice existing sustainability knowledges, practices, and motivations, including ways of seeing water beyond a kind of commodity or resource. There was sometimes less effort to take religious life seriously, beyond seeing it as a kind of tool in the toolkit of sustainability resources. So, based on these learnings, we made 6 recommendations summarized here. So, to water industry actors, we recommended listening and learning from religious or spiritual or cosmological communities and individuals. We suggested that alternative ways of relating to water could actually offer new pathways for sustainability. We also recommended the industry take time to reflect on the assumptions and biases they brought to their encounters with religious communities. And we encouraged them to avoid generalizing and to attend to the great diversity within communities, including in their approaches to water. And to all stakeholders interested in the intersection of religion and climate crisis, we recommended collaboration. For meaningful and just change, it's really critical that those most immediately impacted by water interests and issues should be at the center of the design process of any kind of interventions or actions. This means that it's for all actors to acknowledge that anybody can meaningfully participate in that process. Also, there's so much already going on in this space that the water industry maybe isn't engaging with or seeing, and that collaboration should support or recognize existing sustainability practices and relations. And finally, for those with expertise in the domain of religion and education, we recommended further research and engagement, possibly including the development of some kind of religious sensitivity training. So, of course, this was quite a small research project, just a couple of months, but we learned a lot, and I think it has larger implications for water futures and climate action. So first, our water courses are in crisis. We know this here in Cambridge, and I think across the UK and really across the world. More broadly, we know that climate change is an immediate and pressing issue. And the usual approaches to making decisions about and acting towards water aren't achieving the necessary change at scale and speed. There's an ever-growing demand for water, for development, for growth, and so on. And a key part of that issue is that we, and certainly I would say government actors, planners, developers, and even the water industry, tend to take water as a commodity and resource there for human extraction that helps drive growth. But arguments based on crisis and metrics and economics aren't convincing enough people to make enough significant changes in their behavior. And indeed, today, scientists, water activists, lawmakers, and academics agree that the solution to the water crisis and to climate change overall will not come from new technologies and new policy and improved science communication alone. Really fundamental changes in attitude, in behavior, and in relations are needed. How we relate to something shapes how we act towards it. So, I think our research suggests that religiously rooted ways of thinking about and being with water might have lessons to offer us here. Relations not grounded in economic or efficiency logics, different visions for the future, different ideas about our responsibilities to water now and for later generations. The second big takeaway, as I said at the start, is that the water crisis is a polycrisis, and religious lives and needs are often left out of the conversation when coming up with solutions. Truly just movements forward have to acknowledge those, have to make space for them in those spaces where decisions are being made. And I'll end with a slight caveat. I don't mean to say that everybody everywhere needs to become religious if that's not meaningful for you. And I also don't want to say that one side, religious water users, offers a clear and direct solution where the other, the water industry, totally fails. But I do think this research shows us the importance of considering religious values and ways of being with water, and maybe learning from those values for improved water futures. So, looking ahead, really critical to this kind of work and the change it aims at And I think the change that Cambridge Water does want to achieve is that it's long-term and requires ongoing relationship building and exchange and co-learning. So to that point, we at the Cambridge Interfaith Program are continuing our collaboration with Cambridge Water, with project interlocutors and other stakeholders via a number of routes. And I think we'll also put some links in the chat to some upcoming events. So for instance, over the next couple of months, I'm convening a series of workshops together with a colleague in water engineering and Cambridge Water. And the goal is really to facilitate sort of cross-sector and interdisciplinary knowledge exchange around the values of water, to identify current limits to conceptualizations of and approaches to decision-making about water, surface diverse value systems of water beyond the economic and commodity-based, and develop methods for incorporating and building on values-based approaches to enhance sustainability decision-making and behaviors. So we're bringing together all different kinds of actors in that space, I hope. We also have a new community of research and practice that's just started up that will meet monthly. I think we'll also put a link to that. And we envision many more of these kinds of exchanges in the future. So please do feel free to have a look at any of these upcoming events. If you're interested in getting involved, please also do feel free to get in touch with the Cambridge Interfaith Program if you'd like to know more or have an idea for an event or collaboration. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Jane Bellard from We're the Agency, and we ran the behaviour change activity that happened as a result of this campaign. And so taking on from where Anastasia and the team left off with their research, we then moved forward with how do we actually turn this into some action that we can evidence what's worked and what hasn't, and learn. So we thought about motivating. How do we motivate faith and diverse communities to want to save water? And there's a lot of different ways that you can come at this. And what we looked at, to narrow it down, because inevitably there are so many groups that we could have targeted, there are a lot of communities and we could cut it in lots of different ways. But what we went for is looking at the highest volume win from a water saving point of view. So we looked at two different areas. So there's the Muslim faith, and we also looked at the Southeast Asian culture within the UK. And actually, this was born of the insight around rice washing, particularly the Southeast Asian culture was born around the insight around rice washing, because there is a practice of washing rice 5 to 9 times that is prevalent in that community, not exclusive, of course, and actually that was something that isn't potentially needed outside of the UK, but is fairly outdated as a requirement for what rice that's sold in the UK, and therefore there's an opportunity there for savings. We also and we saw that could be a large scale because it being such a universal thing that people use and wash rice. And then within the Muslim faith, there was the insight was surfaced around wudu, the ritual washing made before prayers, that's done 5 times a day by practicing Muslims, and that if that is done using more water than is needed or is mentioned in the scriptures, then that could be a really big opportunity to tap into an insight that is already existing that we can leverage to help save water. So I'm going to start by talking about the wudu project. So we wanted to support Muslims in their faith and in reducing water, and actually finding the insight, which came from Mumin himself, that wudu, which is the practice of ritual washing before prayers, when it was done by the Prophet, peace be upon him, he did it using 1 mud, which is roughly 1 litre of water, and in trying to be the best Muslim possible, you're trying to follow the scriptures and what the Prophet, peace be upon him, did. And so by making wudu in the prophetic way, you're not only saving water potentially, but also furthering your faith and doing things how you want to do them in the best practice way. And so therefore that became a really, really useful space to tackle. And it's very important that that we got the tone right, the messaging right, how we talked about it, the language we used, the messenger. And so we were very much looking at delivering this message that if you were to make wudu under a running tap, which takes about 2 minutes, it's around 12 litres of water used. Now that is a generalization. It's not definitely 12 litres. There's very many different ways that one can do it, but you really need running water. And it is a ritual of washing various parts of the body, so it takes a certain amount of time. So we use this principle of, if you were doing it for 2 minutes, which is roughly how long wudu takes, then you'd be using 12 litres if you just had the tap on. And actually what we're saying is, let's show you how to do it as the Prophet, peace be upon him, did. And that way you're using 1 litre, which actually provides a huge potential saving of around 55 litres per person per day. And when we consider the scale of the Muslim population in the UK, that could be an enormous saving, and is certainly worth considering as an opportunity for the industry. So the strategy that we went with was getting the Cambridge Central Mosque congregation to adapt the wudu practice the prophetic way, so using 1 litre, by educating them about this sunnah, and providing wudu bottles. So I'll just explain sunnah. Sunnah is essentially I guess, sort of guidance for how one follows the Quran. And so it's sort of scriptures, and it's showing you the practice of more practical application of the scriptures. And so you even just using the word sunnah and the concept of reviving the sunnah says you should use 1 litre to make wudu. It's actually just reminding people and bringing that information to the fore. We're not preaching as such, and we're not telling. We're reminding people of something that perhaps they've just forgotten, or maybe never knew. That's a small detail that they might have overlooked. So what we did was, we knew we needed a messenger that was going to be listened to, and the ultimate messenger in a mosque is the imam. And so we used the I think head imam, Imam Sajjad, and we invited him to an event, which we also invited 13 influential congregation members to. And we asked him if he would, we filmed him making wudu the prophetic way. And so what he did was shared how the story behind it, the understanding of from a religious point of view, what the symbolism of it is, how one should do it, and how to do it using just 1 litre. And how he did it was using a measuring jug, so that he just had a measuring jug, so you could see how much. And in fact, he used less than 1 litre in the video. And now there's a sort of long version of that video and a short version of that video, which was then cut down and delivered to the congregation. We also delivered it in other ways. So the message was given by the imams. There's several imams at Cambridge Central Mosque. During prayers and the sort of notifications after prayers, that message was given out. And we also ran events. So we did 2 events at the mosque during Ramadan. And we stood at the front as people walked through, and about 1,000 people come through in that sort of 20 minutes before prayers. It was a very sort of fast flow of people. And what we did, we had 1 litre of water in a jug and 12 litres of water in a jug, and kind of said, if you're making wudu under a running tap, it's this. If you make it the prophetic way, it's this. And that sort of instant, okay, I get it. Right, what do I need to do? How do I do this? Here's a QR code, watch the video, so that you're catching them in a moment where they probably haven't got much time before prayer starts. They want the information and they're interested. And the feedback was very much, thank you for doing this in our language, make it like reviving the sunnah really captured people's attention, of sort of like, oh, you took the time to listen and understand our the way we speak, the words we use, and you've grasped it. And that, I mean, full credit to Moomin for providing that information, but that was really critical in engaging this community. And we also gave out co-branded water bottles at the event, which were more successful than we had anticipated, but they were 1 litre, which helps. But during Ramadan, they helped save many single-use bottles, and were really well taken up by the community. They also provide a co-branded space, and there was a lot of positive feedback about the fact that this was co-branded. This was a collaboration, and it felt like it came from the mosque with the expertise behind it from the water company. It didn't feel like the water company telling, you know, it wasn't sort of dictatorial in any way. We shared those messages on social media. What was a key learning is it's not particularly effective for the water company to use that message on social media. Like it's fine, but from a targeting point of view, it's not possible to target people based on their religion, and therefore there's either a lot of wastage or it feels too scattergun. It didn't land from the water company. It was much better received from the mosque. And actually the really critical finding from all of this is the mosque has got to be the messenger and the leader in this, and actually having the buy-in of like we're fortunate enough at Cambridge Central Mosque, they have a sort of marketing person that could help us, but whoever is the person who is running that those communications needs to be a really critical part of this team. And that content feeling like it was very much coming from the mosque. It was informative, it wasn't judgmental, it was about helping to educate and grow everybody. So we also gave out wudu bottles. Now, this is an interesting sort of part of the project. It was a challenge. It was a real challenge to get a physical bottle that would help people make wudu using 1 litre, and ideally you want that to be under a running stream of water, even if it's only a dribble. And actually I think there are other sort of myths that were slightly debunked during the process, along the lines of it's not actually about washing, it is about the significance and symbolization of washing, as opposed to actually being clean and scrubbing oneself very clean, and therefore the amount of water needed is only a dribble on each area, and therefore 1 litre is fine. And so Moomin did a good job looking at lots of different companies that were trying to get going and get started making wudu cups and bottles, and we looked at several different vendors. We were trying to get them from all over the world, and it was really challenging. As much as anything, they're mostly young Muslim males who are trying to get their business off the ground, usually fresh out of university. Interestingly, that seems to be where the idea is coming from. We did eventually get 150 wudu bottles. It was quite a long time after, about 6 months after the original launch in Ramadan, and we had been asking people to sign up along the way, and so those people who had then received a wudu bottle, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. That was also something that when we were in the mosque during Ramadan, people really wanted to hear about. So that is definitely a learning, and I think also a potential commercial opportunity for the water industry, where we're giving away shower heads and timers and tap aerators. Could wudu bottles be part of that? And actually the gratitude that would come from this community to be acknowledged in that way feels like it is a real missed opportunity. Measurement, there are many ways that you can measure the success of this. Obviously, the most important is, did it save water? Around 6,000 litres of water was saved from this campaign, from this congregation in Cambridge. However, there are a lot of caveats around the confidence in those numbers, because it's such a small area and we couldn't articulate this household as part of this congregation, and therefore they have saved this water. It's come from a combination of meter reads from the people who we do know who signed up for the wudu bottles, and DMA data. So it's not high confidence level data, but it does indicate that there was savings made. We do know from the engagement that we had with the actual community on the ground, and through Moomin with the leaders, that that it was well received. But measurement is a really important part, and I think in terms of rolling this out, because this is now available in a toolkit, which Rachel's going to talk through after the break, that in terms of rolling this out, measurement is a really interesting part of it, and I think it is possible, but the scale on which we were doing it was possibly just a bit too small. In terms of support for the campaign, so we have a website, revivingthesunna.co.uk. You're welcome to visit right now. It's there. that is a place that we can guide people to that's got just this information about it. So it would be ideal to have that as part of the Cambridge Central Mosque website, but actually in terms of it being something where someone's coming, they're getting all the information they're looking for there and then, that's really crucial. So that is a really useful resource, and anybody who rolls it out will be able to utilise that website, and we can make that into something. This is a portal for all, and that includes the videos from Imam Sajjad and showing how to make wudu using 1 litre of water. Launching during Ramadan was interesting. So it actually only gave us 12 days to get this off the ground, including filming Imam Sajjad and getting that video ready for the launch. I can't say I recommend doing it in 12 days, but it is possible. But Ramadan was a great and a difficult thing all at the same time, because the message is really, really pertinent during Ramadan. It is a time of reflection, of extra prayer. More people come to the mosque. People are talking and congregating more often. Word of mouth is much easier to spread. However, it's really busy and very intense, and actually it's a lot like Christmas in the UK, where all the advertising is at you, the charities are all trying to communicate with you, a lot of people are trying to get your attention, and therefore it's quite hard to cut through with a message. I think my recommendation would be launch this not too far ahead of Ramadan, really embed the message and remind during Ramadan, as opposed to launch during Ramadan. So in terms of what it looks like and how that looks, we used, again, we had to do this in 12 days, so that from a branding point of view, we went very close to the Cambridge Central Mosque branding, but also with some of the colourways from Cambridge Water, so that it felt very much an integrated piece of work. And we're very fortunate that Cambridge Central Mosque has beautiful building and beautiful branding. And these are just some video, some photos that you can see of the video of Imam Sajjad and some of the events that we did. But there was also collateral, and I think one of the most important pieces of collateral is actually the old school leaflet with a QR code on it, and actually just being able to hand something out to people who are in a rush, who are going past you, who can see this is relevant to me and I'm interested. I just don't have the moment right now to have a full conversation, or maybe I've had a conversation, but I haven't got the time to visit the website and sign up and that kind of thing. One thing we did really learn from the website is we had originally asked people to pledge to try to make the change to use 1 litre. And actually the word pledge, and to be fair, Moomin had counselled this at the time and we should have listened better. The word pledge has a much greater significance within Islam, and actually it's not taken lightly, and it's almost something that you must then stick to. And actually we were asking more for someone to try to stick to it, and it was a less concrete pledge that we were asking for. And so after time we changed that to intention. Thank you. We changed it to intention, so that it was much more about, I want to try to do this, and that made a big difference, and that saw more sign-ups and more people sort of engage with the communications, and there's lots of social content here that you can see. So from a learnings point of view, the messenger effect is crucial. It's really, really crucial. And I would go as far as to say the most crucial thing in this, because actually, if you stripped away all of the collateral and all of the branding and everything else, if the messenger is the Imam and is telling his congregation about this, using 1 word instead of 1 litre instead of 12, that is actually enough. Like, this is great, and this grows it, and this allows for many more people to see it, for there to be a more concrete engagement with that. But actually that messenger is vital. The social media from the mosque is another part of that messenger, and it coming from them and not the water company is again crucial. And I think in terms of this being rolled out, this needs to be very, very much a collaboration, and that will take time and will take manpower. And I think the thing is, it's going to be something that can be really, really rewarding for water companies, but a lot of it is actually just human to human contact and liaison and building those relationships. And I would also say, it really matters to have someone from that community in your water company doing that liaison. It was a huge door opener for us to have Moomin as the project lead on this. He was able to have conversations that perhaps wouldn't have taken place otherwise. And I think having the being sympathetic to the needs of the community and somebody who really genuinely understands it is really, really crucial. So I would definitely counsel to have an internal team be, not necessarily the entire team, but certainly a key spokesperson be from that community. Now this is ready to roll out, so I won't spoil Rachel's section by telling you all about it, but essentially this is here, this exists. You can roll it out from today. That there is a very comprehensive toolkit, and all of these assets are available now. There'd be small changes needed to change the name of the mosque, etc. But it's ready to go, and it's here to be used. The Innovation Fund is very much there to kickstart things that then you can take forward. So I'd really, really urge you to consider moving this forward. And Moomin and I are really happy to be contacted and help in any way. I do think there is a top-down potential here. You know, if we were to get the Muslim Council of Britain to adopt this and take it from a top-down level, I feel like it would be at its most effective. However, that may not be possible, and so but I feel like if we could get that, I guess, pincer in both directions, that would really, really help to move this forward and make it more national more quickly. And you very much need that mosque buy-in, mosque level buy-in. It is hard to measure, as I've talked about, but it isn't impossible. And there are also other leading factors, you know, who you've talked to, thank you. Sorry, there are also other leading factors, so how many people you've spoken to. You can survey that community, you can ask for, you know, you can have in mosque kind of buttons, have you changed your behaviour to this, etc. And then, but there is such a high water saving potential here. It's huge, and it feels like a miss to not attempt to do it when you look at the numbers that what could be achieved and the numbers that we have to hit. And very much going back to what Anastasia was saying, there's so much to gain from really understanding these communities, and particularly what she was saying around knowing the diversity within these communities. This is not one mass of people. This is many people who have many different, you know, variations of opinions and experiences, and getting to know that is really, really crucial and important and enjoyable. I talked about the Ramadan cut through, but and I think having Moomin, as I'd said, is really, really important. So I won't go over the key statistics now, but all of the data's there. But we had about 2,000 people, you know, saw us face to face during this process, and as I say, about 6,000 litres of water saved. I'm going to move on to rice washing. So this was getting to the point of deciding that it was rice washing was quite tricky, because there are a lot of different insights around different communities and generalizations, and you know, it was hard to find what is the thing that we should focus on. And there were things like washing chicken as a practice that but what we were looking for was something where there is the potential for people to actually change their behavior. Rice washing, if you are told from a young age that you must wash your rice 5 to 9 times, or even just that you must wash your rice, you believe it, you think it. It's the same way that most of us think you need to wash your hair or put deodorant on. It's quite an intrinsic belief, and I felt very nervous that we were ever going to get people to stop washing rice. Didn't believe that behaviour change was going to happen. But what we could do is ask people to use less water and do it more efficiently and reuse that water. That felt like more of an achievable gain, and also it wasn't saying what you do or you think is wrong. It was saying there's this other way that you can do it. And so that was really important. I really didn't want to be saying you got this wrong, because nobody changes their for that reason, very few people. And today in the UK, it's actually largely unnecessary to wash your rice certainly that many times. So the objective was very much about raising that awareness and the visibility of sustainable kitchen practices, particularly within the Southeast Asian communities in the UK. And we actually were targeting here in South Staffordshire, where there is a fairly large community, but that's where the advertising was pushed to. But actually, inevitably, this rice washing doesn't just exist within the Southeast Asian community, and I think that was part of the appeal, was actually this is a broader piece of work, and it doesn't need to feel as if this is exclusive to any one community. So our strategy was very much get the UK Southeast Asian population to wash their rice using less water and repurpose the water that the leftover starchy water, by educating them about economical washing practices. So the budget wasn't huge for this. This was like, we've got to be really, really targeted and tight about this. Who they're going to believe, and it needed to be somebody from their community. And how are we going to get this message across? It felt like it needed to be their story. And so actually, what we did was we got Ping Coombs, who is a MasterChef winner and a Malaysian chef, and she was able to, using video, tell her story of how her mother used to teach her this, but actually now she's learned you don't need to. And so she wasn't saying you should, she was saying I do. And she's got the caliber of both being a Malaysian chef and a MasterChef winner to say, okay, well, if she's worked that out, I think I could probably also do that without the sort of dictatorial message. So she was able to deliver the message about using rice water and how you wash it more economically. And then we had two different influencers. So one, the head gardener from Garden Organic, talking about how you can reuse starchy water in your garden. And we had Sonia Harrier, who is the beauty editor for The Telegraph, but has also just written a book, and at the time had just launched a book called South Asian Beauty. So the perfect influencers to talk to their individual communities. So we created these two videos. I'll show one of them in just a second. And it was about how do we get really influential, the right messenger to talk about the right thing. So let's see if this works. I press. So we cut that slightly short, just there's a little bit more information if we've got several versions. But what we did was then that message was put out on Cambridge and South Staff's Waters social media. We boosted it in South Staff's to as close to the right community as possible, but also including the interests of gardening and then also beauty, depending on which video. And then Garden Organic, Ping and Sonia also then shared it on their socials. And then an opportunity came up to use Sky AdSmart, who can target very effectively the Southeast Asian community. And so what we wanted to do was then say, okay, we will use this footage. Now, it was not shot as an ad, so it's not a standard advert. However, we had the opportunity to use it and wanted to test it. So we managed to do a 30-second cut, and that was then used on TV. So it allowed us to reach more people. And we also did some events in local gurdwaras. And we also tried to talk to the community to get their opinion, like when they've seen it, how did they feel? Did they understand the message? To try and validate it, because it's quite hard to measure the water saving attached to this when there was other activity going on. So as I mentioned, social media campaign, we did, and I've put the results here. We're totally transparent about everything of how much was spent on each of the channels and how much viewing time that people had and how many impressions that they saw. So this is all just within the South Staffs region. We did actually also have a couple of other water companies that were on the project, and they used the videos and put it on their socials, and those results are not included on this table. So it was definitely it was a really interesting exercise in how do we get this messenger right? How do we get this message right? How do we try and very gently inform people without it feeling too much and too again dictatorial? And how can we subtly change people's behaviours? And we did interestingly have some focus groups where people had seen it and had changed their behaviour as a result of it. So always the win. So in terms of a summary of learnings here, I think I've talked about this at length. The messenger's got to be right. Ping was a perfect messenger for this. Imam Sajjad was a perfect messenger for this, and also this using this social channels is the right way forward for that, for those for getting that message out more broadly. Engaging authentically is really crucial, and I think that is really important. You get that wrong and it will bomb, and I think that what we're showing you here is the end result. There is plenty of shaping and weaving that we've done to make sure that this is really authentic. We've talked to the right people and made sure it works, but there is so much potential here. The potential for, I mean, these videos again exist. They can be used as they are. You don't need to do lots of other work or a big campaign around it. This exists and you can share it with your communities now. But yeah, the potential for water saving is huge, and the potential for engaging in these communities is huge. Right, I believe we are on to a break now. Dave Securus, give you the details.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So we are just going to go to a short break now. Your cameras and mics are already off, so you don't need to leave this call. Just simply return to your laptop at the end of the break. We'll also be sharing a poll. So we are testing a new poll function. So please do fill it out before you jump off and let us know if it's worked. When we launch the poll, you'll receive a notification, either pop up in or in the chat, asking you to accept an app called Polly. This won't cause any security risks for you. It's just a step needed to answer the poll. Once you've accepted, you'll see the poll pop up, and you'll also see it in the chat, and you just press answer to give your reply. We really appreciate your feedback to help us develop and shape our service offerings, enhance your experience, and ensure we're meeting expectations for future showcases. That being said, we will go to a break now. So it is exactly 11 o'clock, and we will return at 11:10 to hear about WaterWise's fantastic project toolkit and next steps in the project before going to the Q&A. So make sure you please keep putting your questions in the chat, and then we can get our presenting team to answer them. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Oh, hello and welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. As you can see on the PowerPoint slide there, if you've really enjoyed today's showcase, please sign up for future spring showcases so we can share the knowledge across the sector, basically. So now we are going to be hearing from Rachel about WaterWise's fantastic project toolkit and next steps. So I'll hand over to Rachel now.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be sharing the toolkit with you today. I'm just going to move this. Sorry, move that on. Fantastic. Great. Thank you. So today is the launch of the toolkit and also of the Ofwat report that accompanies the project. And it's quite different. It's quite exciting because often these projects get done within companies all over, and then they end up sitting on a shelf. So it is so exciting to be part of this, and WaterWise creating the toolkit, which you'll see from the slide here, is split into two sections. There's the guidance section, which contains all the helpful insights and learnings that we've talked about already this morning, but so much more as well. And the second part is the toolkit itself, which is the it's aimed at water companies, water practitioners, to just pick up straight away and start using to create your own water efficiency in faith and diverse communities project and campaigns. I'll go through that a little bit in a short while on the video, but really you can jump straight into the toolkit, but I'd also encourage you to read some of that guidance sections as well, because that will really help you develop your own campaigns. It is aimed at water practitioners, but clearly in collaboration with your local communities. So really, you can't escape actually going out there and talking and listening firsthand, and that comes across quite a key learning point throughout this project, and it's noted in the toolkit. So moving on to how it's laid out, and I'll explain this in the video that I'll play for you shortly, is a 6-step process. It is designed to be linear and to follow that kind of 6-step approach as it's mapped out there with the arrows. However, if you want to just jump straight into a certain section, if you're sort of halfway through or already have a campaign in development, you can just do that. But I would encourage you to look at the other sections as well. But it's most adaptable if you start from that first step of prepare and go all the way through. So without further ado, this is the front cover. I shall press the play button and talk you through some of the steps, some of the key learnings and some of the templates that you'll be able to use straight away.
Hi, I'm Rachel Dyson from WaterWise, and I'm here to walk you through the Water Efficiency in Faith and Diverse Communities Toolkit. This toolkit was developed to support water practitioners in designing water-saving campaigns that are inclusive, culturally respectful and impactful. While it is designed with water professionals in mind, it also holds value for faith and cultural communities whose deep lived experience and understanding of these practices far exceed what's captured here. The toolkit is intended as a resource for collaborative working, where water professionals can listen, learn and build campaigns in genuine partnership with the communities they serve. Let's take a look at how it works. The toolkit can be accessed via the WaterWise website and clicking on the projects page. When you open the toolkit, you'll notice it's divided into 2 main parts, the guidance section and the 6-step campaign model. You can jump straight to either section using the clickable contents page in the PDF. It's designed to make it easy for you to find exactly what you need, whether you're just getting started or looking for tools to support your ongoing work. Before we dive deeper, I want to highlight the glossary section at the front of the toolkit. This is an important reference, especially for those less familiar with the religious or cultural terminology. It includes respectful, accurate definitions for terms like wudu, mud, fard, and more. Using the right language is essential to building trust and showing respect. Let's begin with the guidance section as we scroll down. This part shares what we learned from working closely with local communities, particularly through 2 key campaigns, Reviving the Sunnah and Rice Washing. Here's the Reviving the Sunnah page. It explores how Islamic wudu practices can be made more water efficient by following the prophetic method using just 1 mud or about 1 litre of water without compromising on the ritual. In this section, you'll also find practical insights on faith-led messaging, respectful terminology, and how to build community trust from the ground up. You'll also find guidance from the rice washing campaign, which worked with Southeast Asian communities to explore how deeply rooted cooking practices like washing rice multiple times could be gently adapted for water efficiency without losing their cultural importance. The campaign included creative collaborations with food and lifestyle influencers, highlighting ways to save water and reuse rice water for beauty and gardening, all while celebrating heritage and tradition. Now let's move on to the heart of the toolkit. The heart of the toolkit is a 6-step project and campaign planning model. You can see those steps across the bottom there. This is where you'll spend most of your time if you're developing your own campaign. Let's start with step 1, prepare. In this step, you'll define your project objectives, map out stakeholders, and assess whether your organisation and team are ready to begin. For example, the readiness to act checklist and all the checklists and links are often found in these blue highlighted sections just to help with guidance. If you click on that, it opens up into a simple Word template you can download and fill in as a team. Just opening it up now. There we go. You'll see it includes a list of key criteria for both project level readiness and campaign level readiness. For each item, like stakeholder engagement, governance, available resources, or behavioural insights, you'll rate your current status on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 meaning you're fully ready. Once completed, the total score will give you a quick snapshot of how prepared you are and where you may need to focus your planning efforts before moving forward. This is a practical, flexible, and really helpful tool to help kickstart conversations across teams so your campaign is built on solid ground. You'll see there are a few other handy templates you can download in this section too. I won't go through each one right now just to keep things moving, but they're all there to help guide you through your planning. Moving on to define the challenge and goal. This step is all about getting clear on what you're trying to change. What's the behaviour you want to change? What are the barriers to changing behaviour? And what are the real root causes behind it? You'll start by agreeing the overall objectives of your project so that everyone involved is aligned on the purpose and an intended impact. You'll also find guidance on how to learn from similar campaigns and initiatives, along with links to useful external resources and case studies. These can offer inspiration, practical ideas, and help you build on what's already worked well elsewhere or not worked so well elsewhere. From there, it's important to agree on the specific problem or challenge you want your campaign to address, as well as the preferred behaviours you're aiming to encourage in response. The why chart here is a useful tool to support this process. I'm just going to open that up. It guides you to keep asking why until you uncover the deeper root causes behind the behaviour. This insight is key to designing interventions that feel relevant and are easier for your audience to act on. And here I've given a bit of an example of what why might have looked like if used on the Reviving Sunna campaign. Moving on to the next step, step 3, is about gaining customer insight, getting to know the people you're trying to reach. It's where we move past assumptions and dig into your audience's daily habits, values, motivations, and the barriers they might face in changing behaviour. To begin, you'll want to identify a specific audience or community group to focus on. This could involve some simple segmentation, breaking down your wider audience based on characteristics like culture, age group, faith practices, or everyday routines. That helps ensure your campaign is focused, relevant, and respectful. Once you've chosen your audience, take a look at the resource options list. in the toolkit. It outlines different research methods like surveys or interviews and helps you weigh up what's most suitable for your project and your audience. The goal is to uncover what drives your audience, what do they care about, and what might be stopping them from changing their behaviour. One really useful tool here, when I open this, is the motivators prompt list. This prompt list defines 14 key theories that motivate personal action, with pointers underneath each one on how they might be used. Things like benefits to me, emotion, fear of loss, the need to know, the need to belong. You can use it to reflect on which of these are most likely to connect with your audience, based on their values, beliefs, experiences, and community context. It's a great way to ensure your campaign speaks to people in a way that feels personal, relevant, and motivating. Strategy. Moving on to step 4, developing your campaign strategy. Here you'll define your campaign's messaging, select your communication channels, and shape the visual identity of your campaign. The communications plan template helps you map out everything from email content to social media posts, community events, or face-to-face engagement. I won't again go into all the templates here, but please explore all the helpful information contained in this section. There's also case studies of how the strategy and tactics of the Reviving the Sunna and rice washing campaign were developed that you can use as a basis to shape your own campaigns. Step 5 is implementation, where you'll bring your campaign to life. This step supports you in creating a project timeline and coordinating partners. The project timeline template is especially useful for keeping track of deliverables and deadlines and making sure your campaign stays on track. And finally, review and evaluate. This is where you'll reflect on what worked, what didn't go so well, and how to improve for the future. You'll also find a link to the WaterWise Behaviour Change Evaluation Toolkit. Here we are. This provides a clear, structured framework for measuring both water savings and community engagement. I recommend using the evaluation toolkit right from the beginning of your project alongside this toolkit because it helps shape your thinking from the outset. Using it also makes it easier to share what you've achieved in your project in a clear and consistent way so others can learn from what worked for you and help build up good practices. The Water Efficiency in Faith and Diverse Community Toolkit is designed to be flexible, adaptable, and above all, respectful. We'd love to hear how you're using it. The Water Efficiency in Faith and Diverse Community is a living resource, and your stories and feedback will help it evolve and grow. Lastly, you'll see some at-a-glance case studies from the actual campaigns, along with a table pulled together of specific faith and cultural water practices and uses. I hope this quick run through has been helpful, and I thank you very much for listening.
So there we have it. That video will also be on the WaterWise website along with the toolkit, just so that it's there for you if you want to recap on some of those points. So in summary, we really encourage you to use it. It's there to use straight away. The templates are all there. I think there's about 33 of them. Use all of them, use a few of them, whatever you feel will fit your campaign. As mentioned before, this is designed, this toolkit, it's not a one size fits all in terms of the communities that you'll be reaching, but it really is a helpful guide to get you on your way with your own campaigns. And just to mention, many of you know WaterWise, that we actually have our next campaign coming up. It's the 12th to the 16th of May. It's our next water saving week. There will be a different water saving theme each day. So we really encourage you to get involved. There's a QR code there that you can snap, but you'll also find details on our website. I believe I'm handing back to Moomin now before we go to questions and answers.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I hope that's really useful. Loads of insights, loads of learning there. And just to reiterate, both the toolkit and the report is now published for you to use. So often I get the question, so what next? You know, how do we actually use this? So I just want to share a few examples of what you could be doing next in your organizations. So here's a few examples. So first and foremost, we know smart metering is being ramped up significantly in the next 5 years, so between 2025 and 2030. So I think it's in the region of 10 million smart meters. Some of these communities are quite concerned about metering. One, because it's going to directly impact them in terms of their bill, but also is it going to affect their behaviors and how they use water as well? So we really need to think about how can we more proactively engage some of these communities when it comes to smart metering. And sometimes that includes the why, in terms of why are we installing smart metering and how is it going to help these communities and how can water companies support these communities? So smart metering is an area to consider. The other area is, which we have not really dived into too much, is non-households. So restaurants, caterers. One of the things we noticed when we went to a Gurdwara, a Sikh temple, is they use a lot of water when it comes to food preparations because they're feeding communities every single day. And that includes lots of water in terms of preparing food, washing, and so forth, and sometimes even going to caterers and so forth. So is there some opportunities there to work with so not just in terms of the place of worship, but also some of the non-households in terms of restaurants and caterers as well. And linked to that, I think there's a point around education. So how can we do more in this space around awareness? And if you look at some of the focus groups that we did, time and time again came the question around awareness. Are people aware we have an issue in terms of water scarcity, that we need to meet some of these targets and how it's going to help us in terms of having a sustainable future? So one area in terms of education we thought about was starting from young, and that came up again and again as well. So could you try and embed education around water efficiency and what we're doing in some of the syllabus around faith schools, in some of the other gatherings that some of the mosques have, like madrasas, something we can potentially think about in terms of that water cycle and where water efficiency plays a role. And this is not just exclusive to water efficiency. And I put fats, oils, and grease, which is another issue and problem in some of these communities, which we can think about as well. So this toolkit, as Rachel mentioned, is not a one size fits all. It can be adapted. It can be looked at as a guide in terms of doing other initiatives as well. So fats, oils, and grease is one area, but also drought communications. So as water companies, we have our drought plans, and I think it's coming very soon to reviewing those plans. Could we do something different or review how we, for example, when we have restrictions around temporary use bans or what they call hosepipe bans, is there something we can think about when it comes to religious communities around certain festivals or places of worship, or is it just restricted to holy fountains and so forth? So something to think about in terms of where those restrictions should be in place, but also in terms of drought communications. If we have that relationship with some of these communities, we can get some really strong, powerful messages to get the right action that we want. So that's something to think about in terms of education and awareness. The other bit to mention as well, cultural sensitivity training. So in organizations, and one of the things I said right at the start is at the heart of this project was about EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion. When we look at our own EDI initiatives and programs, is there something we can do around cultural awareness training, unconscious bias, and so forth? And sometimes, you might get the response that this is too complex, Moomin. There's so much to think about, quite sensitive. Let's try and avoid it. It's too risky. but we need to be more proactive and need to recognize we need to do more. You can have your top 10 tips or top 10 hints in terms of how you should be approaching some of these communities. So I really, really encourage for organizations to reconsider their EDI initiatives and can they build in some of this training, especially for technicians or staff that are customer facing, that are speaking to customers almost on a daily basis. I also want to mention around the innovation aspect. So Jane mentioned earlier around procuring this device, this Voodoo device. It was a challenge. You know, I went from Canada to South Africa to Dubai to France. It was not easy, especially some of these were startups as well. I can see today we have a few innovators on the call, and one to mention is Sibyl. So Sibyl are on the call. The chap's name is Faisal, and incredible in terms of the device he's created and some of the thinking behind it as well. So I really think we should be exploring more of some of these devices. And it goes back to the question around the water efficiency devices and measures that we have as water companies. Are they fit for purpose? Do we need to look at other devices that can be part of that suite of measures? And lastly, last 2 points was around continuing to engage with communities, whether it's through workshops, through the mosque. There's an initiative called Eco Mosque. I can see representatives from that initiative on the call today as well. So just a few Sundays back ago, a while ago, I was at this conference where there was a number of mosques up and down the country who are very driven in terms of trying to be more sustainable and building a sustainable mosque. So, but one of the key things that were missing in those conversations is their relationship with water companies. Some of them didn't know who their water companies were. Some of them didn't even know they had a retailer. So it's so important for us to connect to these communities because there are people out there, trust me, that are so keen to do more in terms of water efficiency and to live more sustainably as it's part of their own faith and beliefs as well. So we need to do more to connect water companies with some of these institutions. Last point, international learnings. I think there's so much we could learn internationally in terms of water saving and sustainability. There's a picture here, guesses where that might be, but that picture is a mosque in the UAE, in Dubai. It's the first, not just net zero, but net positive mosque. So it's completely 100% renewable and a fantastic piece of innovation in terms of trying to be more sustainable going forward. And that could almost be your model going forward. And I'm looking forward to visit that actually in a few weeks' time, so I can't wait. But I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that gives some food for thought in terms of areas you can explore in your own organizations. And as Jane mentioned, you know, you can speak to myself, to Jane, any of the team if you want to find out more or work more collaboratively in the future as well. So I'm going to pass over to Kira and go straight into questions.
Cool. Thank you so much, Merman. So if I could just ask the presenting team to come up and join me today, I will stop sharing. Screen. Sorry. Cool. Okay. Right. So we've had lots of questions rolling in today. So thank you to the audience very much. First question that we've had come through from Julian, just a general question to anyone. How would you consider bringing the learnings from this project and align into new developments, in particular, given the challenges faced with meeting growth within Cambridge due to water shortages? Anyone want to
Question.
Jay?
Yeah. So I have worked with Julian on a project about this, so I understand where this is coming from. I think there is definitely opportunities when you've got a new community to be able to talk to them and to understand the, you know, who makes up, what communities make up that individual development and what faiths are present. And I guess what I have seen is quite often there is a place of worship, so often a multi-faith, or sometimes it's a Christian place of worship, but sometimes other faiths use it, and it's often linked to the school. And I've seen certainly churches kind of build vicarages and things within new developments. And I think there is an opportunity there certainly to engage that community that already exists, that has already been brought together. But I think faith schools in particular near new build developments is possibly an opportunity. But I guess it's all about actually really understanding a community and who those people are, what what is motivating for them, whether that is because of their faith or because of other reasons. They become a new community.
Cool.
Just to add as well, so I'm not sure if you know, there are over 2,000 mosques in the UK. So there's a number of mosques, and many of these mosques are trying to develop in terms of trying to be more sustainable. Some of them are very small and they've just started. But when I went to that conference, Eco Mosque conference, many actually approached me and saying, we're developing our building, can we do water recycling? Can you give us advice around water efficiency? They didn't know who their water companies were first of all, or their retailer. So there is definitely more we can do in terms of building that relationship, as Jane mentioned, and then look at how we can support them.
And actually, to that point, water credit systems, which are being developed at the moment to offset the water used in new developments, creating eco mosques would be a good way to do that offsetting.
I'll just add, I think also there are a lot of religious and spiritual communities in Cambridge and elsewhere, I'm sure, who might invite us to question growth in the first place, whether we need to keep growing, whether we need to keep building new developments, whether that can be differently distributed, so something to think about there, not just push forward with nonstop growth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, thank you, everyone. Another question from Brian is that are there any different practices throughout Ramadan?
Yeah, I could have to take that. So in Ramadan, as Jane mentioned earlier, it's a spiritual month where people are a bit more connected to their own personal characteristics, going to the mosque more often. So I wouldn't say there are different practices. However, people are more spiritually connected. So that's why we launched in Ramadan, because there was such a captive audience. Although they were rushing to go in to pray, there were so many people coming to the mosque. So I wouldn't say practices are different, but people are more spiritually connected to hopefully make a change in terms of habits.
Cool. Thank you. So another question from Anna. How did you measure the water use of people who took part in the trial of the Wudu bottle? Were they metered, and how easy was it to encourage them to share that information?
Yeah, great question, Anna Maria. So as Jane mentioned, we had around 172 or 150 people signing up for the Wudu bottle. Of those people that signed up, we found around 90 or so that were metered. And we done additional meter reads to understand the changes in terms of usage, but it was very, very challenging. One, the time period in terms of actually using the product and making that change, you need a good time period to see that change over time. Also, the external factors, many people in Cambridge have gardens, and outdoor use plays a part, seasonality. So it was quite difficult, but luckily we had Artesia on board to carry out the evaluation. And as part of the project report, there is an appendix where you'll feel free to look at in terms of the calculation. And we have found the range in terms of what could be the potential saving. But we certainly know there has been an impact, but it's trying to narrow down what that impact is. And I think one of the future recommendations could be, as we grow smart metering data and that granular data, if we can measure someone over a longer period of time and a bigger sample, because the population is really small in terms of Muslims in Cambridge, then you could potentially see the impact of some of these devices. And that goes for any new innovation. I think we need to just test it a bit more within a robust sort of sample to see the difference it made. But yeah, there's probably more work needed to actually confidently say how much water is saved.
Cool. Perfect. So a question from Lewis. Is the approach one of cognitive anthropology and then leveraging this into an influencing model? If so, should this be a centralized or UK-wide approach for scale and penetration purposes?
Essentially, yes, it is. But it's more than just turning it into an influencing model, but really, ideally, this would be national. The structure of the water industry is not such that it's easy to do something national. If there were a partner that was interested in doing it, wonderful. Who knows what opportunities the water efficiency campaign may bring. But this, yes, in an ideal world, you would take this out on a national level. You would work with the Muslim Council of Britain. You would try and make this something that happened everywhere and that was speaking to that entire community on a on a national level, starting from a national base down, I suppose. With things like the rice washing, I mean, that could certainly be national, but it doesn't need to be. It's not a problem for it to be regionalised, I don't think. But I think in general, in terms of like the ambition of where we could take this. Now, this project has started and ended as such, but the scope for new opportunities within this, and certainly to do something national, are there and are vast, and that it's a huge opportunity that's been fairly untapped to date. And this feels like one of the first forays into this space, but I definitely think that there's a lot of room to manoeuvre and to take that into a bigger, more influencing and more national space.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. That's amazing. Anything else to add?
I was just going to add, this is the first time we've put all those findings and so much research that's gone on beforehand, primary research, but also throughout the campaign and afterwards. We put it all into this toolkit, but it is a very much a live document. So there are so many behavioural change programmes and campaigns we're already doing and the other sectors have done. So I just think it, you know, the more that this document can evolve as well, the toolkit can evolve. You'll never capture everything, but it is really a good starting point to have everything that we know at the moment in one place and then evolve it from there. So please treat it as that. It has all the templates to use and the videos, but really nothing beats you actually using it, and then we can evolve it from there as well.
Sure, looking forward to the scaling out of the project and seeing where it goes in the future. So next question from Lewis as well. How does this cut across other Southeast Asian countries?
Yeah, I can start. So if you look at particularly some of the religious communities like mosque, for example, it is in their nature to be sustainable. It is part of the teaching for many religious communities as well. So if you look at some of the South Asian communities, people try to be water efficient as possible when it's based on their faith, but also in some areas, people where water is scarce or more visible in terms of droughts and restrictions, people are more conscious of it as well. You know, seeing is believing, as they say. But at the same time, some of these practices are inherited and ingrained. So the rice washing example, for example, not just rice washing, chicken washing, meat washing. People are adamant, I need to wash my chicken. I don't care what science says about spreading bacteria. And we're going to be sensitive to that and say, no, don't do that. Rather, how can we support them? And there's another innovation there, I think. Could we do something different in terms of washing your fishes or rice differently and capturing that water and using it differently? So there is definitely things going on. And that's my point around international learnings. Could we learn internationally what's going on and bring that here as well?
Cool, thank you. So this is very interesting. This is another question from the chat. This is very interesting. Would be good to see how much uptake there is within target communities. We eat rice a lot at home. It's a staple in our household. Storage of washed water is a challenge though. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we did actually film footage that exists that tackles that degree, and yeah, I think, I mean, even just in the filming of it, trying to make sure that you're putting it into a container that is in itself sustainable, and in a place. So the beauty in particular, Sonia covers using it in your hair and as part of your skincare regime, but really it needs to be kept in the fridge, and therefore we use the glass bottle, the Kilner sort of bottle that you saw in the video, because that's something that can be stored in the fridge. But it's very true. And if you're creating, you know, if you were doing much bigger scale catering and you were creating a lot of excess starch water, there will be times where it's not possible to do that, or you're cooking so you're not able to take it out to the garden. There's definitely some other things that we could do to ease that journey and take some of the friction out of that. But it's within the sort of remit of this, we were trying to just keep it like the reminder that this can be used, but there's definitely more to know, more to share in that story.
I'll just add as well, and I think it's a call for innovators as well. So the biggest challenge is convenience and ease. Some of this stuff is quite difficult, I'm not going to lie. And if there's any Muslims on the call, using that wudu bottle, it requires effort as opposed to switching your tap on. It's just so easy. But the key drive here is being mindful about your water use and then using these as a means to get to that goal. So I think it's a big call for innovators to look at products or ways in terms of making it easier for people. You know, sometimes it can be difficult to finding props or making that effort. But yeah, there's certainly more we can do in terms of innovation, I think.
Absolutely. And I guess in terms of like reusing in the circular economy, having that rice water, if you had it on a huge commercial scale, there's so much opportunity there.
Yes,
So yeah, very exciting. One man's trash is another man's treasure. So in terms of one for Dr. Bader, and is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and it's about barriers/conditions. The water industry can sometimes be afflicted by two conditions: a tendency to other customers and simultaneously be obtruse. What advice would you give as a guiding principle to overcome these shortfalls?
So this is a super interesting question, and definitely one that we have been thinking about within our research team, at least. I think there's a couple of things that we could recommend, maybe. I think the first biggest one is really to encourage a focus on nuance and listening rather than to jump straight into education and messaging. I think one of the tricky things about this particular project was the pace of it. We really had to kind of speed along, which isn't super conducive to getting to know people and sitting down and listening and sort of building from, suggestions coming out of communities. I think this could also be a space where we as researchers can play a role, maybe in terms of encouraging people to actually start within the water company by examining their own biases or their own views on religious communities or customers in general, to think about the kinds of the ways knowledge is produced, to think about the ways that the ways that they're just thinking about customers. I think this could be, someplace that we could sort of intervene, maybe. And then in terms of being obtuse, I think, again, just kind of listening, really attending to nuance, really taking customers seriously as people who also know about water and have legitimate concerns, and who also want to know more from the water industry about what is happening. I think there's definitely, we saw a lot of sort of skepticism and mistrust, and a felt sort of lack of transparency there. So good question. Yeah, for sure.
Very good answer. Thank you very much. Anything else? Anyone else have anything to add? I'll move on to the next question. Perfect. We've got a bit of on-screen collaboration via the chat. Scottish Water have done a great project around fats, oils and greases in partnerships with local authorities in Inverness area in the Highlands. I'd be happy to link up with you and share the approaches and outputs from that. So yeah, we can send that through. And then another question that has come through: smart meters are a good way to go. And many European countries use them. It is saving for the water saving, non-monitoring people. We need to save water water sources are now limited. We are going to go into an era when we will all be short of water. Education is a key factor and huge power, also as knowledge gives us evidence to act now. Great point to highlight. So thank you all for highlighting that. Now we will move on to some other questions. So a question for Moomin. Cambridge Central Mosque is a well-known eco-mosque and ideal partner, but how do we best approach other mosques who may not be so eco-conscious?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned earlier around the Eco Mosque Conference, where there was a number of mosques up and down the country getting together, looking how they can make their own mosque more sustainable and more water efficient. So I think there's something there in terms of building those relationships first before diving in and saying, let's try and change how you use water, etc. So one of the things I would say to start off with is look around your catchment, your area, your supply area. Who are those key institutions, community groups, religious leaders, faith leaders, and try and connect to them, understand what, concerns they might have, issues they might have, and see how you can help them as well. So it's so true in terms of choosing the right messenger. As Jane mentioned earlier, you've got to choose the messenger who is on the same page as you in terms of trying to be more eco-friendly, more water efficient, and so forth. So choose your stakeholders and messengers wisely. But I think at the same time is building those connections first before asking those, those support. So one of the things I would say, just go around and find out who those key stakeholders are and connect to those mosques, I would say.
And also probably add to that, you did some really good events with the mosque and the community and the leaders around water use in faith, and that was a really good sort of scene setting for the community. It was before we leapt in with a campaign, and it gave you an opportunity to just have a conversation with members of the congregation, right? It wasn't everybody.
Yeah.
But I think that starting from the point of like, what can we tell you that's useful to you, and what would motivate you? Like, how do we start this conversation? Just like you're saying, engage on something that's of interest to them, that is your expertise. I think that's always the useful sort of Venn diagram.
Yeah, and I think just touching on that point as well, as you mentioned as well in your first section, that the water industry is probably facing a real trust issue.
Yeah.
So it is around really engaging with those communities, and you will, with any campaign, I imagine, where it's saving water, or even check fat soils in Greece, where you're telling people, or not telling, but you're encouraging people to dispose of fat soils of Greece in a different way. There's skepticism. So it's really, you're going to have to put the work in there to really, we're all trying to reach the same point, but really to understand your community needs, but using all the helpful information, guidance that you'll get in this toolkit as well, but really just understanding, and it's prompts like the Wudu cup that just make it easy to act. You don't actually need one, but it'd be great if there was innovation out there and there was even easier things to use, cups to use. But it really is, you will face probably some skepticism across all customer base, which I'm sure you've experienced. But it is something that is really, really key, and we all need to act, particularly around the water efficiency issue.
I think actually there's a really good point about skepticism and smart metering, to the point of the previous comment. I think we had an issue in the mosque where somebody, an influential member of the congregation, had been spreading rumours that don't sign up to this because it's about they're trying to force you to have a meeting, which was not the case at all. But it permeated fast. It was, we have to go in and intervene and kind of say this is unequivocally not the case. And so these things happen, and unless you're actually close to the community and can hear that and know that that's happening, and then go and talk to the people, or already have influential people, and it really allowed them to understand the full context and been really open and transparent, because they need to know that this is not the case, or is the case if it was. In this instance, it really wasn't, but it was very detrimental to the trust in the campaign, and then therefore the message. And even though, we were only telling them something that was already there and written, it was still then diminishing the impact of it.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all. Another question from the chat: what role do you think faith-based charities can play in influencing water usage behaviour in their communities?
Shall I start with that one? So faith-based organisations, I think they play a real role in terms of trying to connect water companies and institutions and leaders. So again, I'll give the example of the Eco Mosque conference, because I was blown away in terms of the passion and the zeal within the community to do more, up and down the country. And you think, wow, we need to connect these people to water companies, retailers, and other faith groups. And you think, there needs to be more collaboration between these groups. But in terms of some of these institutions, I think they play a massive role in terms of connecting people. And sometimes it goes back to the messenger as well. And just going back to that previous point around trust, I'm not going to lie, when I first approached people in these communities, there was a trust issue. Even I'm, from that community, you could say. And, people are just questioning, why are you coming here? What's your agenda? A water company normally doesn't do this. So it's trying to build that trust really early on is really important. And also, how can you give back in terms of the value exchange, in terms of, so one of the things we did, that co-branded bottle went down really well by trustees and people in the community saying, wow, this is amazing. It fits with our ethos around single-use plastic waste, and also how can it help the congregation as well to believe what we're trying to do. So yeah, I would say they play a massive role in terms of connected communities.
Cool, thank you. Very interesting.
Just to add, there are quite a few faith-based charities that are already super involved in environmental work. And it would just be great to support what they're already doing. They know what they're doing. They're, already helping local communities and projects get off the ground, and doing a ton of wonderful work. And so definitely worth flagging that and supporting them.
Yes, yeah, we can share some links to those charities as well in the case study. Perfect. So another question is the WEFDC toolkit suitable for organizations with limited budget or resources? Sure.
It certainly is. Clearly you need some kind of budget to really get your campaigns to work, but it's taken a lot of the research that you may want to do, and I still encourage you to do first-hand research, and Dr. Bad would certainly say that as well. But it takes a lot of that insight, or we capture that insight already into this toolkit, so it's kind of leapfrogging to actually really tailor all those insights, prompts, useful assets that are contained in the toolkit, and actually develop your own campaign within your community that fits your community. So I guess you still need, I think, budget for anything, but it's certainly applicable to all different organisations. It's aimed at the water sector. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't mean to say that you can't use it if you're not within the water sector, because there's still some really helpful guidance. But yeah, if you're a small organisation through to a large organisation, it is very useful.
And what I would say as well, we really thought about the scalability of this when we were developing it, because it was a big part of the brief. It was no good us creating something you couldn't replicate and easily and relatively cheaply. Like Rachel said, you've got a lot of the work's already been done for you. And I think if you were doing this if you had a really lean budget and not much personnel, I'd say it's still possible to do this. Just putting the rice washing videos on your company's website is not completely free, but small amount of IT project management cost to achieve that, and then sharing it on social media without any boosted pay. You're not making the most of it, but you're making the most of a free resource within the constraints of what you had. A small amount of budget targeted at the right communities, using the social videos could be a really good way to get something quite cheaply. If you look at the costs that we spent on those videos on social media, it was not high, low thousands, but you can do it for 20, 50 pounds. It doesn't have to be everyone if you're really targeted and smart with it. And the work with around Would Do, you could do that with almost no budget, as long as you had some body. If it's personnel that's going to be the thing there, and it's time. It takes a lot of time to engage those communities, but you could start on a small level, or you could also, if you really didn't have much resource and were really keen to do it, look from a voluntary point of view. Try and really engage those communities and actually activating some volunteers in those communities to do the work for you. That there is possibility around it. Probably have to be more creative with less budget, but certainly you could do it with shreds of budget if that was the case.
Great result. Perfect. Thank you. And it looks like we have one more question that we will squeeze in. So I know you kind of touched on it before, but where do you see this work going next, and how can other mosques or water companies move this work forward?
Yeah, so great question. Probably my slide that I summarized. So I think we need to make this as business as usual processes. So within our own organizations, we're looking at all our programs over the next 5-year period and beyond, in terms of how we really considering EDI and some of the learning from this project. Customer facing teams, how we take calls and so forth. The other bit just to add, and it probably links to the earlier point, is look within your own organizations. You might have people that are really connected to these communities. They might have the same background, the same culture, faith, and so forth. Try and tap into that in terms of their connection to that community. So I would say, really look at people and people culture. I think that's the first step. And the second step is look at your programs. What more can you do? And there could be small hanging fruit. Jane mentioned you could just put that video onto your website, your water efficiency page, here's some advice, a tip of saving water when washing rice, for example. So there's some small wins and there's some larger wins you can explore in terms of innovation as well. So I think there's a whole array of stuff that you can do in terms of next steps. But I would say start small, look at people within your organization, and please reach out to myself or anyone on our team if you want to work together on any other future initiatives, or if you just simply need some support in terms of how you roll this out in your organization. I don't even know.
No, totally agree with that.
Cool, thank you. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you to all the audience members for taking time out of your day to join us. And we hope you found this session really valuable. Just before we go, we're sharing a poll again after the event. So please get your responses in, as they've really helped shape the future content for these showcases. I wanted to say a big thank you to Eleanor today, who delivered a great introduction, and a massive thank you to the presenting team, Moomin, Jane, Anastasia, and Rachel, for all your hard work on this showcase today and all of your support today. So I'm really grateful, and for being so open and honest about the learnings involved in the project, and such an interesting project. So yeah, thank you so much again. Keep an eye out on the spring socials, primarily LinkedIn. We will be posting when the case study is available, and it should be available in approximately a week's time or so. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.